3 in the morning has its own kind of silence. Not the silence of a library or an empty church, but something older and heavier than either the silence of a world that has briefly forgotten it is alive. Every sound that breaks it, a dog barking 3 streets over, the distant moan of a freight train, the creak of a house settling into itself, arrives with a strange and amplified clarity, as if the darkness itself is leaning in to listen. 3 in the morning is the hour no one chooses to be awake. Not late enough to call it last night, not early enough to call it morning. It is the seam between one day and the next, where the ordinary rules of the world feel slightly less reliable than they do in daylight. People who know that hour will tell you the same thing. Nothing good comes calling at 3 in the morning. Not a phone call, not a knock at the door, not a message from anyone you love or anyone you owe. Marcus Hale had been awake at 3 in the morning for the better part of 2 years. Not because he wanted to be, because the bills did not sleep, and neither could he afford to. He was 52 years old, and he drove for an app called Quick Haul, delivering food from restaurants that closed at midnight to people who were still hungry after that. He drove a 2011 Civic with a cracked dashboard and a right rear window that would not roll all the way up. In the summer, he ran the air conditioning and tried not to think about the gas. The debt had started with Elena. That was the honest way to say it, though it felt wrong because Elena had not chosen to get sick. Lymphoma stage 3, diagnosed on a Wednesday in March 4 years ago. She had fought it for 18 months with a quiet, specific courage that Marcus still could not think about without his throat closing. She lost the fight on a Sunday evening in September, with the window open and the curtains moving in a small breeze and his hand in both of hers. The medical bills had arrived the following week, then the month after, then the one after that. They had refinanced the house, sold the second car, cashed out the retirement account and paid the penalty. And still the total sat there, patient and immovable, like something that had decided it lived with him now. His father, Raymond Hale, had died 11 weeks ago. Raymond had been a property developer, successful by the measure of a man who never once talked about where the money came from. He had left Marcus a considerable estate. He had not touched it. The thought of it made him feel slightly sick in a way he could not explain to the estate attorney who kept calling. He was lying on top of the covers when the phone lit up. Quick Haul, new order available. Large order 4.9-star restaurant. Delivery bonus active. The delivery bonus was what they offered after midnight when most drivers had gone home. 2.5 times the standard rate. One large night run could cover what 3 hours of daytime driving could not. Marcus had done the math the first week and never had to do it again. He sat up, looked at the address. A street he did not recognize out near the old industrial stretch along the river south of the rail yards. Unfamiliar, but the map showed it clearly enough. 12 minutes away. He accepted the order before he was fully awake. The streets at 3 in the morning are a different city than the one that exists at noon. The traffic lights still cycle through their colors with the same mechanical patience, but they are cycling for no one. Marcus knew which gas stations stayed open overnight, which intersections had cameras, which underpasses smelled like standing water, no matter how dry the summer had been. He had accumulated this knowledge the way a person accumulates any knowledge they never intended to have, slowly, without noticing until it was simply part of how he moved through the world. He crossed the rail yard overpass and turned south. The neighborhood changed the way neighborhoods do when you move from one kind of money to another kind of absence. Warehouses with loading docks, dark. A chain link fence alongside a vacant lot. A single street light at the far end of the block, its orange glow making the pavement look like the surface of something that had not quite cooled. The address on his screen brought him to a stop at the edge of a wide, flat piece of land running down toward the river. No building, no lights. A chain pulled across a gravel access road, and beyond it, the suggestion of a structure or what had once been one, a low, dark outline of foundation and rubble, barely visible against the night sky. Marcus sat with the engine running. The app showed the order as active. Pickup complete. Awaiting drop-off confirmation. He had not picked up anything. There was no restaurant at the address he had driven from. He scrolled back through the order details, and for a moment, the screen seemed to dim, and then brighten again, the way a light flickers when something draws more current than it should. He rolled the window down. The summer air came in warm and still. From somewhere out across that flat, dark ground came a smell he recognized without being able to immediately name. Old and dry, and faintly bitter, with something underneath it that was almost sweet and almost not. The smell of something that had burned a very long time ago. Marcus did not move. The engine idled. He looked at the order on his phone. He looked at the land in front of him. And then, very slowly, the way you become certain of something you have been trying not to be certain of, he understood that whatever was out there in that dark had not been waiting for a delivery. It had been waiting for him. He should have driven away. That was the thing he would come back to later, in the particular way a person returns to a moment they cannot undo. He should have put the car in reverse, backed out onto the street, and let the Quick Haul app flag the order as undeliverable. He had done it before with bad addresses. There was no shame in it. There was a protocol. Instead, Marcus turned off the engine. The silence that followed was different from the silence of the drive over. That had been the ordinary quiet of an empty city. This was something else, a silence with weight and direction, the silence of a place that was paying attention. He opened the door and stepped out. The gravel beneath his shoes was fine and loose, the kind that shifts and whispers underfoot. The air was warm the way summer air in Phoenix stays warm long after dark, holding the day's heat in the ground and giving it back slowly. But underneath the warmth, there was a layer of something else, a cold that had no business being there, the kind that settles against the skin and does not come from temperature at all. He walked to the chain across the access road and stood there, looking in. The lot was perhaps half an acre, maybe a little more. The gravel gave way to packed earth, maybe 20 feet in, and the packed earth was wrong in a way that took him a moment to identify. It was darker than it should have been, darker than the surrounding ground, stained in a way that drought and time had not faded. The foundation outline he had seen from the car was clearer now, a rectangular shape sunk slightly below grade, open to the sky like an empty picture frame. Weeds had grown in it and died in it and grown again, but they were sparse and pale in a way that made him think of things that grow in places where other things have trouble growing. In the center of the foundation, something caught the light. A shape in the earth, smooth and curved like the rim of something buried. He looked at it for a long moment without moving. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out. The Quick Haul app was open, though he had not opened it. The order screen had changed. Where it had previously shown pickup complete awaiting drop-off confirmation, it now showed a single line of text that did not belong to any standard app interface he had ever seen. Delivered. Thank you for coming, Marcus. He stared at it. The review prompt appeared beneath it, the way review prompts always appear. The 5 stars lined up in a row and the text box waiting. But the text box was not empty. Someone had already typed into it. The letters appeared one at a time, slowly, the way text appears when someone on the other end is still composing it. Except there was no one on the other end. We have been here for a long time. We knew you would come back. The cold against his skin deepened. His thumb moved to close the app and found that it would not close. He pressed the home button. The screen stayed on the review. He pressed it again. Nothing. From somewhere inside the foundation, something moved. It was not a large movement. It was the kind of movement that belongs to small animals in the dark. A shift of weight, a displacement of air. But the sound that came with it was not an animal sound. It was the sound of something dragging across dry earth, slow and deliberate, The way a person moves when they are not in a hurry because they know the other person is not going anywhere. Marcus took one step back. The smell that had reached him through the car window was stronger now, much stronger, filling his nose and the back of his throat. That char and sweetness that his mind kept refusing to name, even as some deeper part of him had already named it and was already pulling at his legs. The air above the foundation seemed to waver the way air wavers over hot asphalt in the middle of the day, except the sun had been down for hours and the ground here was cold. He saw it then. Or rather, he saw what the darkness had been arranged around. Standing at the far edge of the foundation, at the boundary between the stained earth and the dead weeds, was a shape that was approximately the shape of a child. Small, still facing him. It had no features he could make out from where he stood. Only the outline, only the posture of a small person standing very straight and very quiet. The way children stand when they have been told to wait and have been waiting for a very long time. It did not move. It only stood there, and somehow the standing was worse than any movement would have been. Marcus ran. He did not decide to run. His body made that decision for him, and made it without consulting any of the parts of him that thought of themselves as reasonable or unafraid. He was in the car with the door pulled shut and the engine turning over before he had taken 3 full breaths, and he was back on the street and moving north before the gravel had finished settling behind his tires. He drove 6 blocks before his hands stopped shaking enough to keep the wheel steady. He drove 12 before he pulled over, put the car in park, and sat with the engine running and his forehead against the steering wheel. His phone was dark and silent in the cup holder. The Quick Haul app was closed. There was no record of the order in his history. There was no record of it at all. He told himself it was the heat. That was the first thing he told himself, standing in the parking lot of his apartment complex at 7 in the morning with a gas station coffee going cold in his hand. Phoenix in July did things to a person. The heat built in the asphalt and the concrete and the walls of buildings all through the day, and then radiated back out through the night and into the next morning, a slow release that kept the city warmer than it had any right to be in the dark hours. A man who drove alone from midnight to 4 in the morning, running on bad sleep and worse coffee, with debt sitting on his chest like something with weight, could convince himself of a great many things that were not strictly true. The mind reached for explanations, the way a hand reaches for a railing in the dark. It was the heat. It was exhaustion. The app had glitched, which apps did, which this one in particular did, with a frequency that had generated several 1-star reviews from drivers who were not Marcus. The lot by the river was an empty lot, and empty lots at 3 in the morning, seen through the windshield of a car that needed new wipers, could look like almost anything. He finished the coffee, crushed the cup, went inside. His apartment was on the 2nd floor, facing the parking lot rather than the pool, which meant the view was not much, but the rent was a little less, which was the kind of math that currently governed most of his decisions. 1 bedroom furnished with the things that had seemed most essential when he had moved in 2 years ago after selling the house. A bed, a couch, Elena's reading chair, which he had brought with him, and which sat in the corner of the bedroom, and which he had not been able to sit in since she died. He showered and lay down on top of the covers and slept for 4 hours. The dreams were not about the lot by the river. They were about Elena, which was not unusual. She appeared in his dreams the way she had appeared in the last months of her life, present and specific, and diminished in ways that he had watched happen and had not been able to stop. In the dream, she was sitting in her chair by the window reading, and the light was the particular color of late afternoon light in October, amber and slanted. The kind of light that makes ordinary rooms look briefly like places worth remembering. She looked up at him and said something he could not hear. He asked her to say it again. She shook her head, not unkindly, and looked back at her book. He woke at 11:30 to a text from the estate attorney. 3rd one this week. He put the phone face down on the nightstand without reading it. Raymond Hale had not been a warm man. He had been precise and capable and financially successful, and largely absent, a man whose affection expressed itself primarily through the funding of things tuition and dentistry and the used car on Marcus's 17th birthday. Practical transactions that stood in for the other kind of giving. Marcus had not expected to miss him and had discovered with some surprise that he did not. Not exactly, only that he kept finding himself with things he wanted to say that no longer had anywhere to go. The estate was considerable. The attorney had used that word twice in their single face-to-face meeting. Considerable. The way people use words when they are trying to communicate magnitude without specifying it. There were properties. There was a portfolio. There was the house in Scottsdale that Raymond had bought in the 90s and which had appreciated in value in the way Phoenix real estate appreciated extravagantly and without apparent justification. Marcus was the only heir, the only child of a man who had outlived 2 wives and cultivated no close friendships that anyone at the funeral had been able to identify. He had told the attorney he needed time. The attorney had said, of course. That had been 11 weeks ago. He did not know why he could not touch the money. He had tried to examine the feeling and found that it did not respond well to examination, only sitting there at the back of his chest, dense and unmoving, something between guilt and revulsion, and a third thing he had no clean word for. He owed more money than he could pay back, driving for quick haul in any realistic span of time. Elena's bills would not care whether he had principles about his father's estate, and still he had not signed a single document. He got up at 2 in the afternoon, ate a sandwich standing over the kitchen sink, and went out to his car. The smell reached him before he had the door fully open. Smoke. Old smoke, dry and faint, and threaded with that undercurrent of sweetness, sitting in the upholstery and the carpet and the headliner as though it had been there for years. He stood with the door open and breathed it in, and then looked around the parking lot as if someone might be watching, as if there might be some ordinary explanation visible from where he stood. He cleaned the car that afternoon. He drove to the car wash on Camelback and paid for the interior detail, the one with the steam and the enzyme spray, and the technician who went over the seats with an industrial vacuum. He drove home with the windows down. He put an air freshener on the mirror, pine-scented, the kind that came 3 to a pack. By 9 that evening, the smell was back. He was in bed with the light off, not sleeping, staring at the ceiling and listening to the parking lot sounds outside when his phone screen lit up the room. 3 in the morning was still 6 hours away. That did not seem to matter. Quick call. New order available. 9 in the evening was not 3 in the morning. Marcus knew that the way he knew the difference between a backfire and a gunshot, the way any person who has lived long enough in close proximity to a thing learns to read its variations. The app ran hot between 11 and 1 when the late kitchens were still open and the bars had not yet closed, and people who had been drinking since sunset started wanting food delivered to places that were not their homes. Before 10, the orders were thin and the bonuses were ordinary. 9 in the evening was nobody's 3 in the morning, and yet he sat up in the dark and looked at his phone. The notification was real. The order was active. The bonus indicator was lit the same amber glow he associated with the deep hours, and the amount attached to it was larger than any bonus he had seen at this time of night. He looked at it for a long moment, doing the arithmetic without meaning to, the way his brain had rewired itself over 2 years of debt to perform certain calculations automatically and without mercy. He accepted the order. The pickup address was a restaurant called Familia's over on 32nd Street, a place he had pulled from twice before without incident. Mexican food family portions, the kind of order that came in a stack of bags and filled the back seat with the smell of cumin and warm tortillas. He drove over without thinking about the lot by the river, or told himself he wasn't thinking about it, which was not quite the same thing. The order was ready when he arrived. 5 bags sealed heavier than he expected. The woman at the counter handed them across without making eye contact, which was normal, and said nothing, which was also normal, and he loaded them into the back seat and pulled up the delivery address. He sat in the parking lot of Familia's for a moment without moving. The delivery address was on a street south of the rail yards. He told himself it was a coincidence. Streets ran parallel to one another in this part of the city. The grid was dense and regular, and just because one street down there led to a flat piece of dark land by the river did not mean they all did. He pulled up the map. The pin dropped 6 blocks from where he had stopped the night before. A residential address, a real one with a house number, and a satellite image that showed a small stucco building and a car in the driveway. He drove. The house was there. The lights were off, which was unusual for a food delivery at 9 in the evening, but not impossible. He parked at the curb and looked at the order details on his phone, going over them for the first time with any real attention. 5 items. He had registered the weight of the bags, but not their number. Now he counted them in the back seat. 5 bags, 5 separate receipts stapled to each one. He read the items: 2 adult combination plates, 2 orders from the family menu, the larger portions sized for a teenager or an adult who ate like one. And then the 5th bag, noticeably smaller than the others, a child's plate, the kind with the sectioned container that kept the rice from touching the beans, sized for a small child. A child perhaps 5 or 6 years old. The customer name on the order was listed as D Family. Marcus looked at the dark house. He looked at the 5 bags in his back seat. He got out of the car and walked to the door and knocked. He waited. He knocked again. From inside, there was no sound, no movement, no light shifting behind the curtains. He went back to the car and used the app to attempt contact the standard in-app call function. The line connected immediately, which surprised him, and then held open without ringing, without voicemail, without anything at all on the other end except a quality of silence that reminded him of the lot by the river. That weighted silence, the silence of a place that was listening. He ended the call and sat for a moment. His phone buzzed. Not a call. A system notification from Quick Haul, the kind he had seen before when an order timed out or a payment processed incorrectly. He opened it. Payment processed. Thank you for your delivery. He checked his bank account, the reflex of a man who monitored his balance the way other people monitored the weather. The number was wrong. Not wrong in the way of a pending charge that had not cleared. Wrong in the direction he could least afford. The balance lower than it had been by an amount that corresponded precisely to the delivery bonus he had expected to receive. The app had charged him. Instead of crediting his account for the delivery, it had withdrawn the bonus amount from his linked bank card, the one he used to cover the gap between what he earned and what he owed. He called Quick Haul support. The automated system told him his estimated wait time was 22 minutes. He sat in the dark outside the house that had no lights on, with 5 bags of food growing cold in his back seat, and listened to hold music that cut out every 4 minutes and then resumed from the beginning. After 40 minutes, he ended the call. He looked at the 5 bags. He looked at his phone. He drove the bags back to Familia's and left them on the counter without explanation, and watched the woman who had handed them to him look at him without surprise, as though she had expected him to return. He drove home with the windows down. The air coming through smelled like smoke. He decided to work the following night anyway. That was not a brave decision. It was a financial one, which is a different kind of decision entirely. The kind that does not require courage because it does not involve a choice. The bank account was down, and the minimum payment on Elena's second hospital bill was due in 11 days, and the Quick Haul support line had not called him back about the charge. He put on his jacket, picked up his keys, and went out to the car at 10:30 in the evening and told himself that whatever had happened the last 2 nights was finished. The first order came in at 11 and was legitimate. A sushi place on Camelback, delivery to an address in Arcadia, 15 minutes, no complications. A cash tip left in an envelope taped to the door of a house where all the lights were on and a television was audible through the wall. He drove back feeling something close to normal. The second order came in at 11:45. A burger place downtown delivery to an address near the convention center. He picked up the food without incident, loaded it in the back seat, entered the address in the map, and pulled onto the street. The map routed him south. The convention center was north of where he was. He knew this without needing to check, the way he knew most of Phoenix without needing to check. That accumulated geography of 2 years driving the same streets. He looked at the screen. The map showed his position correctly, but the route it had drawn was wrong, bending south and then east toward the river, before looping back up toward downtown in a curve that added 8 minutes to a trip that should have taken 4. He overrode it. Typed the destination address into a second app and followed that one instead. The food arrived on time. The customer was satisfied. He drove away thinking about the routing error and deciding it was nothing. The third order routed him south again. He overrode that one too, and the fourth when it did the same thing. And by the fifth, he had stopped thinking of it as a routing error and had started thinking of it as something else without being willing to specify what that something else might be. He ran 6 orders between 11 and 2 in the morning, and not one of them produced a route that did not include a southward bend toward the part of the city that lay along the river. And each time he overrode the map, the correct route was there, waiting for him, available and functional. And he took it and delivered the food and told himself he was fine. At 2:15, he turned down a street he had driven perhaps 100 times, and the street light at the first intersection went out as he passed beneath it. He noticed it the way you notice something peripheral without full attention. Bulbs burned out. It happened all the time. He drove on, and the light at the next intersection went out as he reached it. The orange glow cutting off between 1 second and the next cleanly, no flicker. He slowed slightly. The light behind him, the one he had just passed, came back on. He watched in the rearview mirror as it brightened, and then looked forward as the light ahead of him went dark. They were moving with him, cutting out in front, returning behind, creating a corridor of dark that traveled at the speed of his car, staying around him and ahead of him, pointing south. He stopped the car in the middle of the block and sat with both hands on the wheel and the engine running. Around him, in every direction except south, the streetlights were on, normal and orange and entirely indifferent to him. Only the corridor ahead remained dark, a channel of it running 2 blocks down and then curving right at the intersection that he knew without looking at a map turned toward the river. He sat for a long time. Then he drove north. He drove 6 blocks north and took a left, and drove until the streets looked the way streets were supposed to look, and he could feel his pulse settling back into something manageable. He pulled into the parking lot of a 24-hour pharmacy and sat under the fluorescent glare of the awning lights and breathed. His phone showed 1 new order waiting. He ignored it. He was sitting there, not looking at his phone, looking instead at the ordinary business of the pharmacy parking lot, a night shift worker smoking near the entrance, a car idling at the drive-through window, the comfortable furniture of a world that was still behaving itself, when he saw it in his peripheral vision. Across the street, on the sidewalk, still, a shape the size of a child, standing at the edge of the cone of light, thrown by the pharmacy sign, half in it and half out of it, at the exact boundary where light became shadow. Standing very straight, facing him. He turned his head to look directly at it. There was nothing there. The sidewalk was empty, the light falling on blank concrete, a fire hydrant, a scrap of fast food bag pressed against the base of a signpost by the faint movement of the air. He sat very still and looked at the empty sidewalk for a long time after that. When he finally drove home, he did not take any more orders. He drove with both hands on the wheel and his eyes on the road ahead, not the rearview mirror, not the sidewalks, not the lights. He was almost home when he realized his hands were cold. Not from the air conditioning. The air conditioning was off. He went back in the daylight. That was the rational thing to do, he decided, standing at his kitchen counter at 9 in the morning with a second cup of coffee. Whatever was happening, whatever he thought he had seen on those 3 nights, the sensible response was not to avoid the place, but to look at it directly, in ordinary light, with ordinary eyes, and determine what was actually there. Rational people investigated things. They did not drive north when their GPS told them south and sit in pharmacy parking lots watching empty sidewalks. He drove out to the river district at 10 in the morning when the sun was already doing serious work on the asphalt, and the air carried the smell of hot concrete and someone's lawn irrigation 2 blocks over. The industrial stretch looked different in daylight. Smaller, less consequential. Warehouses that had seemed ominous at 3 in the morning were just warehouses, the kind of unremarkable commercial buildings that existed by the thousands in every American city. Their metal sidings sun-faded to the color of old bone. He found the street without the map. He had the route memorized now, which was not a thought he wanted to examine too closely. The lot was there. Of course it was there. It was a lot. It sat between a tire shop that appeared to be open and a fenced storage yard that appeared not to be, and in the full light of a July morning in Phoenix, it was simply a piece of ground that nothing had been built on, bounded by a chain across the access road, and whatever that chain had been keeping out for however many years. He parked and got out, and stood at the chain the way he had stood there 3 nights ago, except that now he could see the full extent of what the dark had only suggested. The staining on the earth was real. He had not imagined it, and the daylight did not diminish it. The ground inside the foundation outline was a different color than the ground outside it, darker by several shades in a way that was not shadow and not simply composition, but something that had happened to the soil and stayed there. The foundation itself was lower than he had registered from the car, sunk further below grade, its edges crumbling inward. The weeds growing in it were pale, in a way that healthy weeds in a Phoenix summer were not. In the center of the foundation, the object he had seen the first night was visible now. The rim of something ceramic or stone, flush with the earth, a circle perhaps 18 inches across. An old well casing maybe, or a cistern cover. The kind of feature that showed up in lots like this, remnants of whatever had stood here before the thing that had burned. He was studying it when he heard the screen door. The house next to the tire shop was small and set back from the street, mostly hidden behind an overgrown oleander hedge. The man who came through the screen door was old, somewhere in his late 70s or early 80s, wearing a short-sleeved shirt and the kind of canvas hat people wore for yard work. He stood on his porch and looked at Marcus without any particular alarm. "You looking at the Delgado property?" the man said. It was not quite a question. Marcus said he was just looking. He was a delivery driver, he said. He had been routed to this address a couple of times and was trying to understand what was here. The man came down off his porch and walked to the edge of his yard and stood on his side of the chain fence that separated his property from the storage yard. He looked at the lot the way a person looks at something they have looked at many times. "Family lived there," the man said. "Long time ago now. Nice family from what I remember. Kept to themselves mostly. Kids played out front in the evenings when it cooled down." He paused. There was a fire. Early 90s. I was not home that night, but my wife was. She heard the engines. 5 of them in the house. None of them got out. Marcus was quiet for a moment. 5, he said. 5, the man said. Parents, 3 kids. Youngest was just a little thing. He looked at the lot again. Nobody ever built on it after. Can't say I'm surprised. Some ground just doesn't want to be built on after something like that. Marcus asked him who owned the property now. The man scratched the back of his neck under the canvas hat. "That I couldn't tell you with certainty. Changed hands a few times. Used to be some company that bought up a lot of the parcels along the river back in those years. Bought cheap and sat on them." He thought for a moment. RH Land Holdings, I think it was. Something like that. Letters R and H. My wife used to complain about the weeds they never cleared. Marcus nodded. He looked at the lot. He looked at the old cistern cover in the center of the foundation, sunken and still. He thanked the man and walked back to his car. He sat behind the wheel for a long time without starting the engine. R.H. Land Holdings. He had seen those letters recently, not on a sign and not in a news article, on a document. A stack of documents the estate attorney had mailed to him 3 weeks ago that he had placed on the kitchen counter without opening and had subsequently moved to the top of the refrigerator because he could not look at them and could not bring himself to throw them away. He drove home. He did not drive south. He went straight to the kitchen and took the envelope down from the top of the refrigerator and stood at the counter with it in his hands for a moment before he opened it. The envelope contained 43 pages. He stood at the kitchen counter and went through them one at a time, the way he should have gone through them 11 weeks ago, reading each page before setting it face down on the counter and picking up the next one. It took him 40 minutes. When he was done, he had a clearer picture of what Raymond Hale had left behind, and the picture was not simple. There were 4 residential properties in the valley, all held under Raymond's name directly. There was a brokerage account, a pension, a small life insurance policy that named Marcus as beneficiary, and then there were the subsidiary holding companies within companies, the layered corporate structures that Marcus recognized as the architectural language of a certain kind of real estate operation, the kind that acquired distressed properties and held them, and sold them and acquired more, the kind that left very little visible above the surface. 3 subsidiaries were listed. The first 2 meant nothing to him. The third was R.H. Land Holdings, LLC, incorporated in Arizona in 1989. Active status assets to be transferred upon settlement of the estate. He set the page down on the counter. He made himself another cup of coffee he did not particularly want and stood at the window looking out at the parking lot and let his mind do what it was going to do regardless of whether he permitted it. Then he sat down at his laptop and started looking for the Delgado fire. It took him less time than he expected. A house fire that killed 5 people was the kind of event that left marks in the public record even 30 years later. The kind that showed up in digitized archives of local newspapers and county records, in a brief mention on a historical society page maintained by a retired school teacher who had grown up 2 miles from the river district and cataloged its losses the way other people collected stamps. The fire had occurred in October of 1992. The cause had been listed as undetermined, pending investigation. A follow-up article published 8 months later noted that the investigation had been closed without a determination of arson, though the fire investigators' original report had flagged several anomalies in the burn pattern, consistent with accelerant use. No charges were filed. The families' names were in the first article. He read them carefully. Tomas Delgado, age 38. Carmen Delgado, age 35. Their children, Sofia, age 14. Daniel, age 11. And Lucia, age 6. Marcus sat back from the laptop. He read the names again. He read the ages again. He pushed back from the table and went to the couch and sat there for a while without doing anything. The apartment was quiet. Outside, a car pulled into the parking lot and its door closed, and someone's footsteps went up the exterior stairs, and a door opened and closed on the floor above him, and the building returned to its ordinary silence. He went back to the kitchen counter and looked at the 5 quick haul order receipts he had saved on his phone, the photos he had taken of the screen on the night of the second delivery. He had not been certain why he had saved them at the time. He understood now. 2 adult combination plates, Tomas and Carmen. 2 family menu orders, the larger portions, Sophia and Daniel. 1 child's plate, sectioned container-sized for a small child. Lucia, 6 years old. 6 years old in 1992. Which meant she had been alive for approximately the same number of years as his delivery car was old, which meant nothing except that 6 was very young to die in a fire in your own home on an October night. while an investigation that would find nothing waited to be conducted. He stood at the kitchen counter for a long time. The thing that had been sending him orders was not random. It was not a glitch, and it was not a haunting in any generic sense of that word, the kind of thing that happened to strangers in houses they should not have moved into. It was specific. It had his name. It knew he would come back, which implied it knew something about him that he was only beginning to understand himself. 5 people, 5 meals. The family whose ground his father's company had purchased, at what price and under what circumstances the estate documents did not specify, but that the fire investigators' flagged report and the 8 months of silence that followed it suggested plainly enough. He went to the window again. The parking lot was ordinary. The oleander along the fence moved slightly in a breeze he could not feel through the glass. He thought about the estate attorney's word. Considerable. He thought about the 4 properties and the brokerage account and the life insurance policy and RH Land Holdings LLC and the 43 pages he had not been able to open for 11 weeks because something in him had known or had come close enough to knowing that it amounted to the same thing. He thought about the child's plate in the 5th bag, the sectioned container that kept the rice from touching the beans, the size of it, the specific considered size of it, as though whoever had placed that order had known exactly how much food a 6-year-old girl needed for dinner. He turned away from the window. His phone was on the counter. He did not look at it. He already knew that when 3 in the morning came, it would light up. He was beginning to understand that it would keep lighting up until he gave them something other than food. He did not go out that night. He had made that decision by early evening, standing in the kitchen with the 43 pages stacked on the counter and his laptop open beside them. Whatever the app wanted from him, it would not get it by sending him south toward the river again. He ate a bowl of cereal for dinner, which was the kind of meal a person ate when they were thinking too hard to think about food, and he went back to his research, and he told himself that staying home was a form of control. By 10 o'clock, he understood that it was not. The smell arrived first. Not the faint threat of it that had been following him for days, the wisp he could almost explain away as imagination or car upholstery, or the particular quality of Phoenix summer air. This was the smell as it had been when he stood at the chain across the access road, close and present, and complicated the char and the sweetness underneath it, filling the apartment the way a smell fills a small space completely, and from no identifiable direction. He checked the stove. He checked the outlets. He walked through the apartment, opening closet doors, which felt absurd and found nothing. He cracked the window, and the night air came in, carrying the ordinary smell of the city exhaust and irrigation water and the faint chlorine of someone's backyard pool. And for a few minutes, the apartment smelled like that instead. Then the window air thinned and dispersed, and the other smell settled back in, patient and unhurried, as though it had simply waited outside for him to finish. He went back to the laptop. He had been pulling property transfer records from the county assessor's database, a public resource he had found referenced on a genealogy forum while looking for information on the Delgado family. The interface was designed for a different era of internet and operated accordingly, slow and unbeautiful, returning results in text tables that required patience to parse. He had been working through RH Land Holdings acquisitions for the past 2 hours. He found the Delgado property in the 3rd page of results. Transfer date, January 14th, 1993. Transferred to RH Land Holdings LLC from the estate of Tomas and Carmen Delgado, deceased. Consideration paid $42,000. He looked up the assessed value of comparable properties in that corridor in 1993. The number the database returned was $118,000. $42,000. 6 weeks after a fire that killed 5 people. A fire with an anomalous burn pattern that an investigator had flagged, and a follow-up that had closed the case without conclusion. His laptop screen flickered. He looked up. The screen had gone briefly to something that was not his research. A white screen with a single line of text small and centered. The kind of thing that appeared for a fraction of a second and left him unsure whether he had actually seen it. He had seen it. Order pending. Pickup familias. Drop off you know where. He pressed the back button. His research returned. He sat looking at it and then looked at his phone, which was on the counter across the room, dark and face up. From the bedroom, something moved. Not a large movement. The specific weighted creak of a piece of furniture accepting the load of a person settling into it. A sound he had not heard in this apartment since he had moved in, because the only piece of furniture in the bedroom that made that sound was Elena's reading chair, and he had not sat in it, and he was not sitting in it now. He sat at the kitchen table without moving for what felt like a long time. Then he stood up and walked to the bedroom doorway and put his hand on the light switch and turned it on. The chair was empty. Of course it was empty. It sat in its corner by the window the way it had sat for 2 years, angled slightly toward the light. A paperback he had never removed still splayed face down on the arm where Elena had left it. The room was cold in a way that had nothing to do with the air conditioning, which he had turned off hours ago. He could see his own breath faintly in the bedroom air. He stood in the doorway for a long time, looking at the empty chair and the paperback and the window behind them, where the parking lot lights made a dull orange rectangle through the curtain. Then he went back to the laptop. He kept working because working was the only thing he knew how to do when everything else had become unreliable. He pulled Raymond Hale's business registration records and cross-referenced them against the RH Land Holdings filing date. He found the original articles of incorporation. He found the registered agent. He found in a scanned image of a document that the county records office had digitized in 2011 from physical files, a signature at the bottom of the RH Land Holdings formation paperwork. Raymond D. Hale. Signed and notarized on March the 3rd, 1989. 3 years before the Delgado fire. 4 years before the purchase. Not a subsidiary he had inherited. Not a company he had acquired later and perhaps not known the full history of. A company he had created himself with his own hand and run for the entirety of the period in question. Marcus sat back from the laptop. The bedroom was still cold. The smell of smoke was still in the apartment. Outside, 3 in the morning was less than 4 hours away. He picked up his phone and searched for the name Frank Delano. Frank Delano was not difficult to find. 30 years ago, he had been the lead investigator on the Delgado fire for the Phoenix Fire Department, a fact Marcus confirmed through a digitized index of the department's public records. What had happened to his report? The one that flagged the anomalous burn pattern and the indicators consistent with accelerant use was also part of the public record, though it took longer to find. The report had been reviewed by a supervising official 14 months after the fire and reclassified as inconclusive. The supervising official's name was noted in the reclassification memo. Frank Delano's response to the reclassification was not part of any document Marcus could locate, but the fact that Delano had retired from the department 6 weeks after the reclassification was issued suggested something about how he had taken it. He was 71 now. He lived in Mesa, in a neighborhood of single-story houses built in the 1980s, the kind with gravel yards and covered carports. Marcus found his address through a public records aggregator and his phone number through a site that charged $3 for access to contact information of private individuals. He paid the $3 without hesitation, which was a different calculus from any he had applied to money in recent memory. He called the number. Voicemail. He left a message that was more honest than he expected. Something about being the son of Raymond Hale. Something about the Delgado fire. Something about needing to understand what had happened. He did not mention the app, or the orders, or the child's plate in the 5th bag. He was not certain those details would help his case. He went back to the records. He found what he was looking for in the archives of the Phoenix Business Journal, a regional publication that had covered commercial real estate transactions in the valley throughout the 90s. A brief item, 4 sentences, published in August of 1992. RH Land Holdings had submitted a purchase offer on a parcel of land in the River District. The item noted part of an ongoing effort to assemble a larger development footprint along the southern corridor. The offer had been declined by the property owners. The date of the item was August the 19th, 1992. The Delgado fire had occurred on October the 3rd, 1992. 6 weeks between a declined offer and a fire. 6 weeks between a no and an ending. Marcus set down the phone and pressed both hands flat against the kitchen table and stayed like that for a while, feeling the laminate surface under his palms, something solid and temperature neutral and entirely indifferent to what he was understanding. He had been raised in a house his father had bought in 1984 with money from a development company incorporated in 1989. He had gone to the University of Arizona on a partial scholarship and a check from Raymond that had covered the rest of the gap without complaint or condition. He had driven a used car his father had bought him at 17. He had borrowed nothing more from Raymond after that, had prided himself on that, had told himself and Elena and anyone who asked that he had made his own way. But the foundation of the making had been laid by Raymond, and Raymond had laid it on top of something that Marcus was only now excavating. He thought about Elena, about the hospital bills and the refinanced house and the retirement account they had cashed out, and the debt that had been sitting on his chest for 4 years. He had not touched Raymond's estate because something in him had known it was wrong. He had been right, for reasons he had not fully understood until tonight in this kitchen with the smell of smoke still present in the air and the bedroom still cold. The estate was considerable. The attorney had said that word twice, and the estate had been built on $42,000 paid to the family of 5 people who had not agreed to sell and who had subsequently stopped being people, and on the $118,000 in value between what Raymond had paid and what the property was worth, and on whatever had happened on the night of October the 3rd, 1992, to make that transaction possible. He thought about the 5 names: Tomas, Carmen, Sophia, Daniel, Lucia. He thought about the 5 bags in the backseat of his car, the weight of them, the smell of cumin and warm tortillas that had briefly filled the car before the other smell had replaced it. The specific practical kindness of a sectioned container for a 6-year-old rice separated from beans, everything in its place. His phone rang. The number was a Mesa area code. Frank Delano's voice was the voice of an old man who had been expecting a call like this for a very long time and had not decided yet whether its arrival was a relief or not. He said Marcus's name back to him as a question, and then said Raymond Hale's name in a way that contained no question at all. "You need to come here," Delano said. "Not on the phone. There are things I kept, things I should have made public a long time ago. I kept them because I didn't think anyone was listening." Marcus looked at the kitchen counter, at the 43 pages, and the open laptop, and the phone numbers he had paid $3 to find. He looked at the bedroom doorway, still dark, the cold leaking out of it into the hall. "Someone is listening now," he said. He arranged to meet Frank Delano at 2 in the afternoon the following day. That left him 12 hours, and he spent the first part of them the way desperate people spend their hours when they have arrived at the edge of what they can understand and are not ready to step off. He searched. He read. He went down the particular kind of online rabbit hole that opens up at 4 in the morning when a person types words like haunting and how to stop and family and guilt into a search bar without quite admitting to themselves what they are asking. He drove to a Catholic church on the north side at 7 in the morning when the doors opened for the first mass of the day. He sat in the back pew and watched the small congregation of early risers, mostly elderly, mostly women, move through the familiar rhythms of the liturgy. The priest was young, earnest, not unkind. Afterward, Marcus approached him in the vestibule and said he was dealing with something he couldn't explain, something that had to do with his father and a family that had died. The priest listened carefully and said he would pray for Marcus and for the family, and he meant it, and it was not enough. Marcus drove to a shop on the edge of the arts district that sold incense and crystals and books about energy cleansing. The kind of place he would never have entered 6 months ago, and bought a bundle of sage and a small bottle of something the woman behind the counter called protective salt. She was matter-of-fact about it, transactional, the way people are when they sell things that others bring their real pain to. And she told him to open the windows and move clockwise through the space and speak the names of anyone he wanted to release. He drove out to the river district. He told himself he was not doing this. He did it anyway. He ducked under the chain across the access road and walked to the center of the lot with the sage bundle lit and smoking and the salt in his other hand. And he moved through the foundation outline the way the woman had described, and he said the names aloud into the flat morning air. Tomas, Carmen, Sophia, Daniel, Lucia. The air was hot and still and smelled of sage, and underneath it, something else entirely. The stained earth did not change. The pale weeds did not respond. The cistern cover in the center of the foundation sat flush with the ground in the same attitude of patient permanence. He stood in the middle of the lot, with the sage burning down toward his fingers, and understood with a clarity that surprised him what was wrong with what he was doing. He was trying to make this easier on himself. The Delgados were not haunting a place. Places did not hold things, or if they did, it was because people had put them there and people could take them out. What was following him south on empty streets, what was typing into his phone screen, what had settled into Elena's chair in the cold of his bedroom was not attached to this ground. It was attached to his name, to the Hale in Marcus Hale, and to what that name had purchased and what it was still purchasing quietly in his bank account every month as the estate sat unsettled and accumulating. You could not sage your way out of a debt. You could not salt a doorway against something that had a legitimate claim to enter. He dropped the bundle on the stained earth and watched it smolder for a moment, and then went back to his car. He drove without a destination for a while, circling through streets he knew by feel, and the memory came, the way memories come when a person has been keeping them at a distance for a long time. Not all at once, a piece at a time. He was 17. It was summer, the specific dry heat of a Phoenix summer that he had forgotten the particular quality of until this year, when the smell of smoke had brought it back. His father had asked him to take Raymond's truck and deliver something to an address south of the rail yards. A set of canisters, maybe 4 or 5 of them in the bed of the truck under a canvas tarp. He had not asked what was in them. This was not because he had not wondered. It was because he had learned by 17 that there were questions his father answered and questions his father did not answer, and that the way to tell the difference was to ask and read the response, but also that the reading carried a cost, because once you knew which kind of question you had asked, you were responsible for what you did with the answer. He had not asked. He had driven. He had unloaded the canisters at the address, which he did not remember clearly, except that it was south near water, the kind of address that existed in the part of the city where things were stored and transferred without witnesses. He had driven the truck back. He had not thought about that afternoon since. He was thinking about it now, and the thinking had a quality that was not quite remembering and not quite discovering the quality of something that had been placed somewhere deliberate and left there and was only now being retrieved. He pulled onto Frank Delano's street and saw the house number and parked in front of it and sat for a moment with his hands on the wheel before he got out. The canisters. He needed to know what had been in the canisters. Frank Delano opened the door before Marcus knocked. He had been watching from the window, which Marcus understood when he saw the man standing in the doorway already holding it open, the posture of someone who had been waiting. He was shorter than Marcus had imagined, compact in the way of men who had spent decades in physical work and carried the residue of it in their frame even in old age. He had white hair and a careful, assessing way of looking at a person that Marcus recognized as professional, the look of someone trained to read a scene.
"Come in," Delano said.
I put on coffee. The inside of the house was orderly in the specific way of a man who lived alone and had decided that order was a form of control. Books arranged by size. A kitchen table with one chair slightly pulled out from the others, the working chair. On the table, a manila folder and a cardboard banker's box with the lid off.
31 years, Delano said, sitting down across from Marcus and wrapping both hands around his mug.
That's how long that box has been in my garage. I moved it to the table last night after your message. Marcus asked him to tell him about the fire. Delano told him.
He was methodical about it.
Clinical in the way of a man giving testimony he has rehearsed without intending to, because he had told the story to himself so many times that the telling had acquired a shape. The fire had started in 2 locations simultaneously. This was the first thing and the most important thing, Delano said, because a residential fire does not start in 2 places at once unless something makes it start that way.
The origin points were in the garage and in the northwest corner of the living room on opposite ends of the structure. The pattern of the burn between them showed directionality consistent with a poured trail. The investigator's term was pour pattern. Delano used it without emphasis as a fact. He said all of this had been documented in his report. He said the supervising official who reviewed the report 14 months later had characterized the pour pattern as consistent with a spilled accelerant source, specifically a stored container of lawn equipment fuel that had ruptured in the heat. He said there was no stored container recovered from the scene intact or otherwise. He said this had also been in his original report. Marcus asked him what happened to his report. Delano opened the manila folder. He slid a photocopy across the table without speaking. Marcus looked at it. It was a memo from a supervising battalion chief addressed to Delano, dated 16 months after the fire. The language was administrative and careful, the language of an organization making a record of a decision that might later be reviewed. The word inconclusive appeared 3 times. Delano said, "I retired 6 weeks after that." He said it without heat. He had had 31 years to remove the heat from it, and he had done the work, and it showed. Marcus asked if he had found anything else, anything that was not in the official record. Delano reached into the banker's box. He pulled out a spiral notebook, the kind used for field notes, and opened it to a tabbed page near the back. He read from it without looking up, the way a person reads something they have read enough times to know where the words are on the page. October 5th, 1992, he read. 2 days after the fire. Canvas interview neighbor to the south, 83 years old, name and address noted elsewhere. Subject states she observed a green pickup truck in the driveway of the Delgado residence on the afternoon of October 3rd, approximately 3 to 4 in the afternoon. Subject states a young man, teenage or early 20s, unloaded items from the truck bed. Subject describes items as cylindrical containers, metal or heavy plastic, 4 or 5 in number. Subject did not observe the young man's face clearly. Truck left the property approximately 4 in the afternoon. Fire called in at 9:47 the same evening. Delano closed the notebook. He looked at Marcus over the table. He had the look of a man who had learned to wait for other people to speak first when he had said what needed saying. Marcus's hands were on the table in front of him. He was looking at them. They were cold, the same cold that had been in the bedroom, except that the bedroom was miles away, and the air conditioning in Frank Delano's house was set at a comfortable temperature, and there was no reason for his hands to be cold. He thought about the summer he was 17. He thought about a green truck and a canvas tarp and 4 or 5 metal canisters that he had carried from the truck bed to the driveway of an address he had driven to without asking what he was delivering or why. He thought about October. He thought about the specific quality of Phoenix heat in October, how it was beginning to soften by then, how the evenings were almost pleasant. He said, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth." Delano said, "I've been telling the truth for 31 years. One more time won't cost me anything."
Marcus looked up from his hands. What color, he said, was the truck? Delano looked at him for a long moment. Then he looked down at the notebook. Dark green, he said. Witness described it as a dark green late model pickup, full size.
Marcus stood up from the table.
He said thank you. He said he needed some air. He made it to the front porch before he had to stop and put one hand against the wall and breathe. Raymond's truck had been dark green. Marcus had learned to drive in it. He had driven it the summer he was 17 on a day in October to an address south of the rail yards. He stood on Frank Delano's porch and breathed the afternoon air and tried to remember if he had known.
He sat on Frank Delano's porch for 11 minutes. He knew it was 11 minutes because he looked at his phone when he sat down and looked at it again when he stood up, and the numbers had changed by that much. He was not certain what he did during those 11 minutes. He breathed. He looked at the gravel yard and the oleander along the fence, and a hummingbird that appeared at a feeder hanging from the porch eave and departed again. He was aware that Frank Delano had not followed him outside, which was an act of consideration he did not have the bandwidth to feel grateful for at the moment, but would later. He drove north on the highway. He was certain of this. He had entered the on-ramp heading north, confirmed by the position of the sun over his left shoulder in the late afternoon sky, and he had set the cruise control at 65 and put on the radio to something with voices rather than music, because voices were company of a kind, and he needed a specific reassurance of other people existing and speaking in the world. He did not notice the city changing around him until the radio went to static. Not gradual static. The voices cut off mid-sentence, and what replaced them was white noise, full and complete, the kind that fills the ears like water. He reached for the dial, and the radio display had gone dark. All of it. The display and the dashboard lights, all of it, except the speedometer, which read 65, which was wrong, because he was not on the highway anymore. He was on a bridge. He knew this bridge. He had crossed it hundreds of times in 2 years of night, driving a 4-lane span over the Salt River that carried the industrial corridor traffic south and east. A bridge with a narrow pedestrian rail on each side and a drop of perhaps 40 feet to the river channel below. He knew it, and he had not intended to be on it, and he did not know how much time had passed between the highway on-ramp and here, because the clock on his phone showed the same time it had shown on the porch, and that was not possible. The steering wheel moved under his hands. Not much, a degree or two. The small, constant correction a driver makes automatically without thinking. But this correction was not coming from him. He watched his hands on the wheel and felt the small movement and understood that the movement was not his, that his hands were passengers on a wheel that was being turned by something that wanted him closer to the railing on the right side, closer to the pedestrian barrier, closer to the 40-foot drop and the dry concrete channel below. He gripped the wheel and pulled left. The resistance was real. Whatever was working against him had weight or behaved as though it did. A slow, steady pressure, like a current in water, like something patient and strong that had been moving in one direction for a very long time. He pulled against it with both hands and felt his arms shake with the effort of it, and the car drifted right by another degree and then another, and the railing was close enough now that he could see the rust on the lower bolts. He said out loud, "No." He said it the way a person says it when they have made a decision rather than when they are asking. He put his foot on the brake and held the wheel, and the car slowed shaking, and the pressure pushed back, and he held on. The pressure stopped, not gradually. All at once, the wheel went slack in his hands, light and ordinary, and the car coasted to a stop in the right lane of the bridge with the engine running and the radio still putting out static and the late afternoon sun lying flat and orange across the river channel below. He sat for a moment. Then he put on the hazard lights and moved the car onto the narrow maintenance shoulder and sat there, properly stopped, because his legs were not working well enough to drive, and he knew it. After a while,
he became aware of a sound that was not the engine, and not the static, and not his own breathing. It was a voice. Small, clear, the voice of a child of perhaps 5 or 6 years old, coming from somewhere he could not locate. Not the speakers, not the back seat, not the phone on the passenger seat. It was in the car with him, the way a smell is in a car, present and directionless. The voice said one thing and then was gone. It said, "Thursday. Come Thursday." Marcus looked at his phone. The radio static cut off and the dashboard lights were turned all at once. The clock and the display and the fuel gauge reading what they had read before, as though nothing had interrupted them. The date shown on the display was Monday. Thursday was 3 days away. He pulled back onto the bridge and drove across it, both hands on the wheel, keeping to the left lane, not looking at the railing. He drove north and did not drift south again. The city arranged itself around him in its ordinary configuration, and the radio found a station, and the voices came back. But his hands did not warm up until he was 3 miles from home. And by the time they did, he already knew he would be on that lot by the river on Thursday night. The only question left was whether he would go as the person who had delivered the canisters without asking, or as someone different. He had 3 days to decide which one. Memory does not come back the way people expect it to. People expect memory to be like a file in a cabinet, something stored intact that can be retrieved intact the same each time. But the mind does not work that way, and Marcus had learned this over 4 years of trying to hold on to Elena. The specific quality of her voice, the exact way she laughed at something that surprised her, the precise weight of her hand in his. Each time he reached for those things, he found approximations. Close, but not identical. The act of remembering changed the thing remembered. What was coming back to him now was not a file. It was more like a bruise being pressed. Something that had been there the whole time, ordinary and untended, that was only now responding to pressure by becoming visible. He spent the 3 days before Thursday pressing on it. The first thing he did was call the estate attorney and ask about access to Raymond's house in Scottsdale. The house had been listed for sale as part of the estate settlement, which he had agreed to by not objecting to anything for 11 weeks. But it had not yet sold, and the attorney arranged for a key to be left under the mat with the kind of efficient compliance that suggested he had been waiting for Marcus to engage with this process in any form whatsoever. Marcus drove to Scottsdale on Tuesday morning. Raymond's house was a 3-bedroom ranch built in the late 1980s, maintained with the particular fidelity of a man who treated property as inventory. Everything worked. Nothing was personal. The furniture was tasteful and interchangeable. The walls mostly bare, except for a few framed architectural photographs of structures Marcus did not recognize, buildings his father had developed or admired, or both. The office was in the 3rd bedroom, which Raymond had used as such since the second wife had moved out sometime in the mid-90s. Filing cabinets, a desk, a bookshelf organized by subject. Marcus sat down in the desk chair and started going through the cabinets. He was not certain what he was looking for. Something from 1992. Some record of what his father had known and when he had known it. Some document that would tell Marcus whether the afternoon of October 3rd had been a coincidence or a commission. He went through manila folders organized by year, the meticulous record-keeping of a man who had expected to be audited and had never been. He found the 1992 folder in the 3rd drawer. It was thicker than the folders around it, the thickness of a year when a lot was happening. Business correspondence, property appraisals, a Christmas card list. He went through it page by page, slowly in the specific way of a person who is afraid of what they might find, and more afraid of missing it. Near the back of the folder, he found a receipt. It was a carbon copy, the old kind, from a receipt book. The kind of physical document that existed in the gaps before everything was digital. It was from a commercial equipment supply company, dated October 2nd, 1992, the day before the fire. The items listed were 5-gallon canisters of mixed fuel solvent, industrial grade quantity 5. The billing address was Raymond's company. The pickup was listed as cash. Marcus held the paper with both hands and felt the bruise responding to pressure. He was 17. He was sitting in the front seat of Raymond's truck, the green one with the engine running, and his father standing at the driver's window talking. Raymond was calm, which he usually was. He was explaining something. He was saying that he needed Marcus to take the truck to a storage address and drop off some canisters that were in the back, materials for a job site, nothing complicated. He was saying he would be home late, not to wait up. Marcus remembered the weight of the canisters in his arms, heavy and hollow sounding when they shifted against each other. He remembered the tarp and the way he had folded it back and folded it forward again after unloading neatly, because Raymond had specific ideas about how equipment should be treated. He remembered the address, which he had not looked at on a map and had not needed to because Raymond had driven him past it once weeks earlier, pointing it out as a property the company was considering. He remembered the house. Not the foundation and the stained earth and the pale weeds. The house as it had been, a low stucco ranch, not unlike Raymond's, with children's bicycles propped against the side wall and a pot of something flowering by the front door, the orange flowers whose name he could never remember that bloomed in Phoenix in October. He set the receipt down on the desk and sat very still. The question was still there. The same question he had been carrying since Frank Delano's porch, since the bridge, since he had first understood that the green truck and the October afternoon and the address south of the rail yards all pointed in one direction. It was a question about himself, about who he had been at 17, about what a boy could know and still choose not to ask. He picked up the receipt again. He looked at the date. He thought about the flowers by the front door, orange against white stucco blooming in the October sun. He thought about the bicycles. He had not counted the bicycles. He had not needed to count them to know that there were enough for a family that included children. He folded the receipt and put it in his jacket pocket and turned off the light in Raymond's office. Outside, the afternoon was getting late. Thursday was tomorrow. Thursday arrived the way days arrive when you have been waiting for them too hard, quietly and without ceremony. Just light coming through the gap in the curtains, the same as any other morning. Marcus had not slept. He had sat in the kitchen through the night with the receipt on the table in front of him, and the apartment dark, except for the light above the stove. The small one he left on as a habit from the years with Elena, who had sometimes gotten up for water in the night and had not wanted to turn on the overhead and disturb him. He had kept the habit after she died, without deciding to. It was the kind of thing a person kept. He went out at 7 in the morning to fill the car with gas. The pump was the ordinary kind coin-operated keypad and a green digital display and a smell that existed at every gas station he had ever used. Petroleum and rubber, and something underneath both that was simply the smell of fuel, the smell of something flammable stored in quantity. He had filled this tank hundreds of times, and the smell had never been anything more than a smell. Today, it cracked the last door open. He was standing with the nozzle in the tank, and his other hand in his jacket pocket, fingers touching the folded receipt when the memory arrived in full. Not a bruise being pressed, not approximations or fragments, the whole afternoon intact, with the quality of something that had been stored carefully and had not degraded. He was 17. October 3rd, 1992. 4 in the afternoon, give or take, the sun still high enough to be hot, but with a different quality than August. A thinning of it, the year beginning its slow turn. He had driven the green truck to the address Raymond had indicated, a house on a quiet street south of the rail yards, and he had parked in the driveway and begun unloading the canisters from the truck bed. He had known what fuel smelled like. He had known since he was young, filling the mower for Raymond on summer Saturdays, filling the generator they kept for outages. He knew the smell of fuel the way any boy who grew up around a man who owned things and maintained them knew the smell of fuel. The canisters smelled like fuel. He was carrying the third one to the spot Raymond had indicated the side of the house near the garage, when he heard the sound from inside. A child's voice, two children's voices, the particular high-frequency exchange of siblings arguing about something that would not matter in 5 minutes. A television in the background. The ordinary sound of a house occupied by a family on an afternoon in October. He had set the canister down. He had stood there for a moment, with his hands empty and the smell of fuel around him and the sound of children through the wall. And he had understood. Not in the way of a calculation or a decision. In the way of a body that knows before the mind does. A cold that had started somewhere in his chest and moved outward. He had understood what the canisters were for, and he had understood what the address was. And he had understood that the family inside did not know he was standing in their driveway. He had picked up the canister and carried it to where it was supposed to go. He had unloaded all 5. He had folded the tarp. He had driven the green truck back to Raymond's house, and he had not waited up as instructed. And in the morning, he had turned on the television and seen the news, and he had gone into the bathroom and been sick, and then he had gone to school. He had told no one, not then, not in the 31 years since. The pump clicked off. The tank was full. Marcus stood at the side of his car in the gas station on an ordinary Thursday morning and breathed through his nose and waited for his vision to clear. The man who delivered food at 3 in the morning had started delivering things the summer he was 17. And the first delivery he had ever made had killed 5 people. He had spent 2 years driving dark streets with the Quick Haul app open, accepting every order, working through the night, while the rest of the city slept. And he had told himself it was about Elena's medical bills. He had told himself it was about debt. But the debt he had been trying to pay was not measured in dollars and had not begun when Elena got sick. It had begun in October of 1992, on a street south of the rail yards, and it had been accruing interest for 31 years. He had not chosen the job randomly. He understood that now. Something in him had chosen a life of delivering things to people who needed them, because something in him had never stopped trying to balance against the day he delivered something that no one should have received. He put the receipt back in his pocket. He got in the car. He sat for a while, looking at the gas station, at the other cars coming and going, people filling their tanks and checking their phones and going on about their ordinary Thursdays. Then he started the engine. It was 4 in the afternoon when he turned south, the same time it had been 31 years ago. The sun was at the same angle, finning the year, beginning its slow turn. He did not need the map. He had never needed the map. He had known the way to this address since he was 17 years old. He drove. Every other time he had gone south, something had taken him there. The app, the GPS rerouting itself, the streetlights cutting a corridor through the dark, the wheel moving in his hands. He had been pushed and pulled and redirected the way water is redirected following the path made available to it. Even the times he had resisted, the times he had turned north and driven until his pulse settled, he had been reacting to something external, something that had decided his direction and held that decision over him. This was different. He drove south because he had chosen to drive south. And the difference between those two things was not small. It was the difference between a confession extracted and a confession given, between an apology demanded and one offered. He understood sitting behind the wheel in the late afternoon traffic on the corridor highway with the receipt in his jacket pocket and Frank Delano's field notebook still visible behind his eyes, that whatever happened tonight would only mean something if he arrived under his own power. He had thought somewhere in the sleepless hours of Thursday night about what he intended to say, not a script. He did not think the situation called for a script, but there were things that needed to be said in a specific order because the order mattered, because the thing that had been wrong for 31 years was not only the act itself, but the silence that had followed it. Raymond was dead and could not stand in front of the Delgados and say his name and account for himself. Marcus was not Raymond, but he was the other person who had known, and he was the only one left.
He would say their names first, all 5 of them. Tomas, Carmen, Sofia, Daniel, Lucia.
He would say what he had done, not what Raymond had done, not what the company had done, not what the system that had reviewed Frank Delano's report and decided inconclusive had done. Those things were true, and they were part of it, but they were not what he was there to account for. He was there to account for himself. For one October afternoon, and one set of canisters, and one decision not to ask and not to stop.
He would say what he intended to give. The estate, all of it.
The house in Scottsdale, and the brokerage account, and the 4 properties, and RH Land Holdings, and whatever that company had accumulated in 31 years of sitting on land purchased with other people's lives. He would give it to Frank Delano to do with as the law and justice suggested. He would call the Phoenix police and request to speak with someone about a cold arson case from 1992.
He would give them his own statement. He was not certain any of this would be enough. He was not certain anything was enough. But it was what he had, and it was real, and he was going to offer it in the only place that seemed to matter.
The sun was low by the time he crossed the rail yard overpass. The July sky in Phoenix at this hour was the color of a fire seen from a distance, orange and red and a dark blue coming in at the edges, and it lit the river district from the west so that the warehouses and the fences and the gravel lots threw long shadows east toward the water. He had driven this route enough times to know it in the dark. In the long evening light, it looked different, older, the sun finding angles that the overhead fluorescence of midnight erased.
He parked where he always parked. The lot looked different at this hour too. Not smaller exactly, but more plainly itself, stripped of the drama that darkness lent it.
The stained earth was still dark. The weeds were still pale. The cistern cover was still flush with the ground at the center of the foundation. These things were what they were, regardless of the light, and in the evening sun, they were simply facts about a piece of land where a family had lived and died. He got out of the car. The air was still warm, the last of the day's heat coming up from the ground. But there was something else underneath it now. Not the sweet smoke smell of the earlier weeks, but something cleaner and harder to name. The smell of water nearby, and earth that had been waiting a long time. He stood at the chain. The lot was not empty. He knew this without seeing anything specific. The same way he had known in the first night, except that now the knowing did not make him want to get back in the car. What was here had been here for 31 years. It had earned its presence in a way he could not argue with. He thought he could feel them the way you feel a room full of people in the dark before your eyes have adjusted. A pressure, a weight of attention. 5 of them, waiting the way they had always been waiting, except that now, the waiting had a different quality. The way the last minutes of waiting for something to end feels different from the first. He put his hand on the chain. It was warm from the sun, rough with rust in places, real and solid in the way of something that had been here long enough to become part of the landscape. He lifted it. He ducked under. He walked forward onto the stained earth, into the foundation outline to the center of the lot, where the cistern cover lay flush with the ground, and he stopped there and stood still. He looked at the sky. The last of the orange was going out at the horizon. In a few minutes, it would be dark. He said out loud, "I know why you sent for me." And then, because it was the only honest place to start, he said the first name, Tomas. The name left his mouth, and the lot changed. Not dramatically. Not the way things changed in the first nights the app rewriting itself. The streetlights going dark. The wheel pulling under his hands. This was quieter and more total. The last light went out of the sky in the west. Not gradually, the way sunset usually proceeds, but in a single step, as though something had reached up and turned a dial.
The temperature dropped the way it drops when a cloud moves across the sun, except there was no cloud. The air became still, in a way that air in an open space never quite becomes. No movement, no ambient breath from the river or the highway or the city pressing in from every direction. He said the second name, Carmen. The smell came back with it. Not faint, not the wisp of it that had been following him for weeks. Smoke and char and the sweetness underneath, present and immediate. The smell of something that had happened here and had not finished happening. Daniel. He felt the temperature drop another degree. His breath was visible now, faintly, in the last light that remained. The pale light that exists for a few minutes after sunset before the dark becomes complete. He was standing on the cistern cover without having walked there. He did not remember crossing the last few feet of foundation. He was simply there, standing on the ceramic circle, and beneath his shoes, the stone was cold, in a way that went past material and into something else. Sophia. Around the perimeter of the foundation, at the edges where the stained earth met the pale weeds, shapes were accumulating. Not people, not exactly. Not in the way that the word people implies a boundary between a thing and the space around it. They were more like places where the darkness had thickened, where the air had been displaced by something that was not air. 4 of them, one at each compass point of the foundation, and as he watched, they became more defined. Not clearer, but more present, the way a sound becomes louder without changing pitch. He said the last name. Lucia. The 4 shapes at the perimeter moved inward by a degree, and the temperature dropped again, and the smell was so strong now that he could taste it at the back of his throat, and from somewhere beneath his feet came a sound that was not a sound from the present. It was the sound of a family in a house on an October afternoon, a television at low volume, the overlapping voices of children, a cabinet closing in a kitchen. It lasted for perhaps 3 seconds and then was gone, and the silence that replaced it was the silence of absence. Not the silence of a place where no one had ever lived, but the silence of a place from which everyone had been removed. He said, "My name is Marcus Hale. Raymond Hale was my father." The shapes stopped moving. He said, on October 3rd, 1992, I drove to this address. I was 17 years old. I unloaded 5 canisters of fuel from my father's truck. I left them where he had told me to leave them. His voice was steady. He was surprised by this. His hands were cold, and his vision had a quality at the edges like the beginning of fainting. But his voice was steady, and he held on to that. He said, I knew what the fuel was for. Not from anything my father told me. I knew because the canisters smelled like fuel, and the house was occupied, and I had enough information to understand what I was about to do. I stood in this driveway with the 3rd canister in my hands, and I heard children through the wall. And I set it down, and I thought about it, and I picked it up again, and I put it where my father had told me to put it. The shapes were very close now, close enough that he could feel the cold coming off them the way cold comes off water or stone. A physical property, a transfer of temperature from something that held a great deal of it into the space around it. He said, I went home. I watched the news the next morning. I have not spoken about this afternoon to anyone in 31 years. He reached into his jacket pocket and took out the receipt. He held it in front of him at chest height, not as an offering, but as evidence, the thing he had found, and the thing that proved the rest of the things he had said were true and known to be true. I am going to go to the police, he said. I am going to give them everything. Frank Delano's records, this receipt, my own statement. I am going to sign over my father's estate to whatever authority can distribute it to the right people, to the people who should have had it, or to memorializing you if there is no one left. I cannot give you back what was taken. I know that. I know that is not what this is. He stopped. The shapes had stilled. All 4 of them. The cold was at its deepest now. the kind that settled into the joints and the chest and stayed. He looked at the four shapes, and he looked at the edges of the foundation, and he looked at the sky, which was fully dark now. He became aware slowly of a fifth presence, not at the perimeter, not moving inward with the others, standing apart perhaps 10 feet behind him and to his left at the spot near the oleander boundary where he had once seen in a pharmacy parking lot a shape the size of a child disappear when he looked at it directly. He turned around slowly. This time, it did not disappear. She was exactly as small as he had imagined. Not frightening in the way the others were frightening. Not the cold weight of grief and fury that pressed in from the 4 points of the foundation. She was simply small. The smallness of a child who has not yet grown into the space they will eventually occupy. And she stood with the particular stillness of a child who has been told to wait and has decided that waiting is something she can do. Marcus could not see her clearly. The dark was complete now, the sky a deep indigo, with the city glow at the edges, and she existed in it, the way her presence had existed in his car and in his apartment. Not a figure with edges, but an impression, a shaping of the air around a child-sized absence. What he could see was the posture, straight, patient, facing him without moving toward him or away. He said, "I heard you that afternoon." His voice came out different than it had when he was making his accounting to the others. Quieter, more careful, the way a person is careful when they are saying something they have never said out loud and are not certain how it will land. "He said you were arguing with your brother through the wall. I don't know what about. It didn't sound like anything important. It sounded like what it was, which was 2 kids in a house on a regular afternoon." He stopped. Then he said, "I set the canister down when I heard you. For about 30 seconds, I set it down, and then I picked it up again." She did not move. He said, "I have thought about those 30 seconds for 31 years. Not every day, because that would require acknowledging what the 30 seconds meant, and I was not ready to do that. But they were always there. The way something you have buried is always there in the ground, affecting the weight of everything above it." He was not certain she was listening in the way a living person listens. He was not certain she was hearing him at all in any conventional sense. But he was saying it because it needed to be said, because the 30 years of silence had been a second wrong layered on top of the first. And this was the only place and the only audience that could receive it. From the 4 compass points of the foundation, he became aware that the cold was changing, not lifting, not warming, but differentiating the way a single sound separates into its component notes when you listen more carefully. The 4 presences were still there. They were witnesses, he understood now, not judges. Whatever judgment had been rendered 31 years ago by what they had experienced, and it could not be altered or appealed. What he was offering was not mitigation. It was the thing that had been absent, the only thing that could coexist with something irrevocable. Acknowledgement. Witness. The simple act of saying out loud that it had happened, that he had been there, that 5 people with names and voices and children's bicycles and orange flowers in a pot by the front door had existed and had not deserved what they received. He took the receipt out of his pocket and looked at it one more time. Then he set it down on the cistern cover at his feet and took his hand away. The small figure moved, not toward him. She turned the way a child turns when they have decided that a thing is finished without drama, without ceremony. The clean pivot of someone who has somewhere else to be. She moved in the direction of the river, into the dark beyond the foundation's edge, and she did not look back. One by one, the 4 presences at the perimeter followed. It was not instantaneous. It took perhaps 30 seconds, which he would later understand was not a coincidence. The cold withdrew incrementally from the edges of the lot inward and then upward like water draining. The smell of smoke thinned and then dissipated,
replaced by the ordinary smell of a Phoenix summer night, warm asphalt, and the distant irrigation smell of water on dry ground, and underneath both of those, the faint mineral scent of the river itself. The actual river.
Present and natural and going about its work.
The city sounds came back. Traffic on the overpass, a car alarm 3 blocks over cycling through its sequence, a dog somewhere in the residential streets to the north barking at something and then stopping. Marcus stood in the center of the foundation in the dark and breathed.
He was alone. He was certain of this in a way he had not been certain of anything in the lot since the first night when he had understood that whatever was here had been waiting for him specifically. The waiting was over. The lot was a lot. The stained earth was earth. The cistern cover under his feet was a piece of ceramic or stone that had been here since before the house was built and would be here after whatever came next. He looked down at the receipt. He picked it up again. He folded it carefully and put it back in his pocket. Above him, a single star had appeared in the gap between the city glow and the dark overhead. The first one visible, the kind that comes out before the others and is brighter for being alone. He stood there for a little while longer. He was in no particular hurry. Then he walked back to the chain, lifted it, ducked under, and went to his car. He sat behind the wheel without starting the engine and looked at the lot through the windshield. An empty piece of ground between a tire shop and a storage yard. A chain across an access road. Weeds. He started the engine. He turned on the radio. The voices came on, ordinary voices, talking about ordinary things, and he sat with them for a moment before he put the car in gear. He had phone calls to make in the morning. He made the calls the next morning. Frank Delano first at 8, because Frank had been waiting for 31 years, and 8 in the morning was not too early for a man who had been carrying something that long. Frank listened without interrupting, while Marcus told him everything he had not told him in the house in Mesa. The specific things, the canister count, and the October afternoon, and the 30 seconds with the third canister, and the 31 years of not speaking. When Marcus finished, Frank was quiet for a moment, and then said, "I need you to come back. I need this on record." Marcus said he would. He called the Phoenix Police Department at 9 and asked to speak with whoever handled cold cases. He was transferred twice before reaching a detective who took his name and number. Someone was in touch that afternoon. Marcus went to the station the following Tuesday with the receipt and a written account of everything he could put on paper, and he sat in a room with 2 detectives for 4 hours, and he told them the same story he had told Frank, with the same specific details and in the same order, because the order mattered. He called the estate attorney at 10 the same morning and said he was ready to proceed. The attorney's relief was audible, the particular relief of someone who has been waiting for a client to become functional. Marcus told him he wanted to transfer the full estate, all of it, to a fund administered by Frank Delano and designated for the benefit of a memorial to the Delgado family and for whatever legal proceedings might follow the police investigation. The attorney said this was unusual. Marcus said he understood. The attorney said it would take some months. Marcus said that was all right. It took 5 months. The legal process was not simple and not fast, which was also all right. The cold case investigation moved at the pace of things that should have moved 31 years earlier, but had not slowly, and with the friction of accumulated time and lost evidence and witnesses who were old or gone. What Marcus had provided was not a conviction, it was a beginning. Frank Delano told him this without apology or softening, and Marcus received it the same way. The estate transfer completed in December. The house in Scottsdale sold. The brokerage account liquidated. The 4 properties, including the lot by the river, passed out of RH Land Holdings and into the Delgado Memorial Fund, which Frank Delano administered with the same methodical care he had brought to his field notebook 30 years ago. A small portion of the proceeds went to a legal firm specializing in cold case advocacy. A larger portion went to a scholarship fund at the school
that Tomas and Carmen's children would have attended had they attended it, which they had not because they had died when Sophia was 14 and Daniel was 11 and Lucia was 6. Marcus remained in debt. Elena's medical bills did not settle themselves because Marcus had done the right thing. The account was still what it was, and the minimum payments were still what they were, and the 2011 Civic still needed new brakes, which he had been putting off because the brakes were expensive, and the car still stopped. He was still a driver for Quick Haul. He still worked the late hours, midnight to 4, when the bonuses were better and the roads were his. 3 in the morning was different now. He could not explain this precisely to anyone who had not experienced the prior version of it and the current version and the specific contrast between them. But the difference was real and total. The city at that hour was simply the city. The traffic lights cycled through their colors for no one, and the gas station stayed open, and the underpasses smelled of standing water. Nothing in it looked back at him. The Quick Haul app sent him orders, and he accepted them or did not accept them, and the orders went to other drivers, and that was all. The GPS routed him where the GPS routed him, and the routes were occasionally suboptimal, and sometimes he overrode them, and that was also all. The radio played voices. The heater in the Civic was unreliable, and the right rear window still would not roll all the way up, which in December in Phoenix mattered more than it had in July. In February, he drove past the lot on the way to a pickup south of the rail yards. Someone had placed a marker at the edge of the access road inside the chain. A flat rectangle of granite, maybe 18 inches across, set flush with the gravel. He did not stop. He read it as he passed at 15 miles per hour with the window down in the February night air, which in Phoenix was cool and clean and smelled of the desert blooming on the other side of the mountains. 5 names, 2 dates, the date of birth for the family and the date of the fire. Nothing else. The granite was dark and the letters were cut clean, and it was exactly the right size for a place where 5 people had once lived, and where the ground still held the particular quality of somewhere that had been important. He drove to his pickup. He collected the order, 2 bags of family dinner for an address on the north side. He delivered it to a house with a light on above the door and a dog that barked once from the other side, and then was quiet. He put the receipt in his pocket and got back in the car. The radio was on. The city was quiet, the way cities are quiet at 3 in the morning, held breath between one day and the next, that particular color that is not quite black. He knew it well. He had spent 2 years inside it, and it had looked back at him, and now it did not. And that was the difference, and it was enough. He accepted the next order. He drove north. If this story found you at 3 in the morning, you are exactly the right person for it. Leave a comment below and tell us what stayed with you. And if you want more stories like this one, stories about the debts we carry and the things that come looking for them, subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss what comes next. We will be here, in the dark, same as always, with something new to put in your ears on the long drive home.